Thank you very much, Josette. And thank you so much, Bianca. That was a fantastic introduction, and I'm so impressed with all the work that Evaluators has been doing. I am going to talk a little bit about the, am I on? It says 5-minute break. I'm on? Okay, thank you. So I am going to talk about the many, many paths there are to becoming an evaluator. So the good news and the bad news is there's not one silver bullet in telling people how to become an evaluator. There's not one way. And there's not one list that anybody's going to give you that's going to say, well, as long as you do this, you're going to be set. So that's kind of maybe the bad news, because the good news is there are many, many paths, and there's many ways to enrich your ability to become, to get the skills you need. So today I'm going to talk about, in general, what do you kind of need to know? But I'm not going to say there's only one way to get there to learn these. But I am going to provide a little bit of guidance about how you might progress your career and what the American Evaluation Association offers to help evaluators earlier in their careers. And by the way, thank you very much, Josette, but I'm actually going to be president of AEA starting January 1st. So John Gargani is president right now for the next few weeks, but I am looking forward to the 2017 year of my leadership of the American Evaluation Association, which will culminate in November 2017 in our conference here in Washington, D.C. Okay, so where on earth do you start? Because there's so many potential tools. There's so many different ways you can get these tools. Well, the key thing is that there are lots of different ways you can go into an evaluation field or profession, and you just need to figure out where's your passion. Are you interested in looking at youth interventions? Are you interested in looking at mental health? Where are the areas of evaluation practice that you're most interested in? And that'll kind of give you an idea of where to start in terms of looking. There's a lot of guidance. For example, the American Evaluation Association is just one of many, as Bianca was pointing out. There are a lot of these voluntary organizations for program evaluation. So that at the individual national level, like the Canadian Evaluation Society, but also at the regional level, such as the African Evaluation Association, European, community evaluators in South Asia, and so on. Then there universities that offer programs. So they offer both programs like a master's degree or a PhD, but they also offer short-term training and so on. Some of the most well-known are in the United States, Claremont Graduate School, that's in California, Western Michigan University, which has a long tradition of offering a lot of coursework and webinars and so on, which I'm going to mention again later. And then in Australia, in England, we here have a very thriving programs in both the master's level and the PhD level. But the point is, in universities, there's lots of different homes for evaluation. It could be, in my case, it's a public policy school, but in many cases it's an education school. It could be social work school, sociology, political science, psychology. There's a lot of different training that's available in universities. The World Bank and other international development funders have training programs across the country, or across the world. And then there's some very easily accessible online training. And I want to really highlight betterevaluation.org because their materials are provided in over 100 languages. So that is a wonderful website because you can get the different languages. And it's almost like an encyclopedia. You can look up anything like what's realist evaluation or what's participatory evaluation involve and how do I involve stakeholders, a lot of those things. Evaluate.org is run by the Western Michigan Evaluation Center, and they archive their webinars, which I think is wonderful, so that you can see what they already have available. They were able to do this because of grants from the National Science Foundation for a particular audience, but now it's available to anyone, and I suggest that that's a great opportunity. Now, what about this thing about how do we know when an evaluator is good? It's a really good question, because there is not an international or even typically any national certification processes or accreditation or anything like that. Now, you do need to know if, for example, if you want to practice in Canada, there is a certification process, and so you need to look into it. But in the United States and in most parts of the world, there is not. There are, this is confusing, but you might get through a training program a certificate. But that's not the same thing as being a certified evaluator. And that's an important distinction. There are not any internationally transferable certifications that you can go to. Might that happen? Maybe, but I think it's going to be a couple of decades before we would get to that point. Another interesting point is, do you have to have a degree, a graduate degree, or even an undergraduate degree, although I don't think they have majors in evaluation? And the answer is no. Does it help? Certainly. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. By the way, I never even had a class in evaluation. It was only when I started teaching evaluation at the George Washington University that I actually learned and started doing evaluation, and now after 3 decades of actually conducting evaluation and teaching it, I definitely know something, but I didn't have a degree. Now, are the knowledge and skills that these different professional associations list similar? Similar, yes. Exactly the same? No. There will typically be minor variations, but in fact, the major categories, for example, for like methodological expertise in qualitative and quantitative methods and working with stakeholders, yeah, there's broad similarities with, I would say, more minor variations on the edges. Now, I want to bring up one Competencies Initiative that is going on right now. The American Evaluation Association has been involved in a multi-year, and I'm proud to say, very inclusive process to develop and vet competencies in multiple areas of evaluation practice. And the reason it's taking years is because we really want to hear from many people. So when will this be done? Well, in fact, identifying the competencies for evaluation will never be done, because it'll always be evolving, because the context in which we operate continues to evolve, the programs we develop continue to morph and change, and so we'll never be done. But we will have a more finalized list by 2018. And so you might say, well, wait, what are you going to do with these competencies? The American Evaluation Association's idea is to at least provide a list of competencies that would be extremely helpful for training programs, university programs, professional associations, to be able to consult to say, you know, do these make sense for us? What would we add? And so on. And the list is on the website, but I want to say, it's not finalized. It literally, we're using focus groups with a variety of different evaluators who are in very different practice and so on. So no, it's not final. The final list will look pretty much like this, but probably a little prettier, a little tweaked here and there. And one of the things is to figure out what are the buckets that we need to organize these competencies. Competencies meaning things that you should be able to do. And right now, these buckets are called domains, and there are 5 different buckets. Professional competencies, methodological competencies, understanding of context, and that is particularly relevant in the international arena, obviously. Management, because you're going to be able to figure out how to manage evaluation work, and then interpersonal skills. And just On a side note, I would say that interpersonal skills are perhaps the most critical part. As I often say that I could teach you how to run a chi-square test on some statistical data very quickly, and I would have confidence that you get it. But teaching or developing people to be able to really interact in a very thoughtful manner with stakeholders is much harder. So I'm just going to run through, because you can look on the website of the American Evaluation Association and understand more about what are involved in, as I call these, 5 buckets or domains. So the first is, what makes evaluators distinct as practicing professionals? One of the things that our current president, John Gargani, said in his speech at the American Evaluation Association conference is that we're one of the most least known professions. That is, a lot of people don't even understand what are evaluators? What do they do? How are they different from researchers? How are they different from sociologists or social workers? And that's a really key point, that we need to do a good job of branding how we are distinct. What do we do? What do we do that a master's of business administration that knows how to market? How are we different from them? And so that's why we talk about this professional domain, is to make sure that we demonstrate how what we do is extremely valuable and distinct from other professions. And reflecting on how we are distinct is important. Excuse me, I have a cough, and I was afraid I was going to start coughing in the middle of this. The bottom line is that we are about contributing to the general and public welfare. That, literally the bottom line on this slide, but also I would say, if somebody said to me, but why are you different? Why couldn't I just hire somebody with an MBA who knows how to market? What's the difference? And I would say, our practice is extremely dedicated to helping improve the programs and the services that help the least deserving throughout the world. And that's embedded in our values. In terms of methodology, again, look on the website. There are so many different tools and technical skills that you can have. You don't need to have them all. You don't need to say, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to be okay in all 14 of these? No, you do not. Your niche might be being a fantastic qualitative evaluator who will be a valued member of a team that also includes statisticians, measurement specialists, and so on. So the point is, some technical skills, like understanding the role of values in what we do, understanding how to match methods to the questions we ask, certainly you need to know. But do you always need to know every single statistical skill and so on? No. You will specialize in certain sorts of the methods. Context clearly matters. We need to understand how to be culturally responsive to the context in which our evaluations are conducted, in which our users are situated, and other stakeholders, and most importantly, the beneficiaries or the intended beneficiaries of our programs. We need to know, but how do we do that? How do we understand context? That's important. Management. So project management is perhaps a way to think about the fact that evaluation work involves working with a lot of people, with a lot of complexity, a lot of moving parts that we need to put together. And so you need to figure out how this sometimes complex, but at least complicated set of moving parts works. And that's why logistical information about managing is important as well. And then getting back to what I said, I think is so, so important. How do you facilitate effective and authentic interactions? Because if you can't do that, you can't do evaluation. You need to be able to hear, to listen intentionally to what the users are expecting, but also to the stakeholders, and importantly, including the people on the ground. Again, the most important, and I think vital skills are not something that are easily learned in a textbook. They are not. It's not about regression. It's about figuring out what are the most relevant, useful questions with potential users of our work via inclusive process, and that's that interpersonal skills part. Inclusive, authentic involvement of stakeholders. And then figuring out how do we match the questions with appropriate evaluation approaches. And this is not something you go do by yourself in an office. It's working with others to make those important decisions. I have a slide. By the way, all the slides will be available, so I don't expect you to read everything, but I like to point out that there's so many potential possible designs that can be used in evaluation. You might have your expertise in one, but you're going to work, the key is to know all the opportunities and to be able to work effectively with others. So depending upon the question, then you figure out, oh, okay, here are possibilities of different designs. How do we select? And you get together and work with stakeholders to select appropriate designs. Now, I pointed out the interpersonal nature of our work. So the question is, well, where do you start? What context do you cultivate? And I would point out that mentors and near peers are extremely important. And I would venture to say that virtually any of my colleagues who are more senior in our careers are always welcoming to younger developing evaluators to contact us for help. For example, Eval Talk is a listserv that the AEA runs, and every single day people are raising very interesting questions about, for example, I'm going to teach a class on evaluation. Can I have a syllabus? I just sent my syllabus to someone last week. Or, do you have an idea of how to recruit a comparison group of teenagers involved in whatever? Very specific ideas, but a lot of the more senior folks in the field are consistently answering. So finding people to help you is not that hard, and I am thrilled that Eval Youth is running a mentoring program. That is fantastic. And near peers are great, because I know it might be, you might feel, oh, I don't know if I can answer this, what I might think is a naive question to somebody more senior, but maybe you won't feel as bad asking a near peer, someone not so much older than you and not as much senior. I want to just finish with saying that the American Evaluation Association provides a lot of free resources. The guiding principles for evaluators are a great place to start, as well as our cultural competency statement. One of my favorite services is what we call AEA 365. Every day you have someone who is an expert in a very small niche part of evaluation that gives some ideas and links, and it's just great. And if you're not interested in that, that's fine. I mentioned training available. AEA has not only from the American Evaluation Association webinars, but also the topical interest groups in AEA have fantastic webinars, and then they're typically archived, and you can get them. I listened to a great one by Gene King on evaluation capacity building a couple weeks ago, that the TIG, the topical interest group on evaluation capacity building, provided. Also, I'm very pleased that we are live streaming our annual conferences, the plenaries, and one session for each period called Presidential Strands, and we'll be doing that again in November 2017. And we are also going to be starting this year. One of my initiatives is an AEA dialogue on race and class and how that affects evaluation practice. We will have 3 seminars or dialogues that will be live streamed across the country, starting on January 20th, 30th in Washington, D.C., and then one later in San Antonio, and then in Chicago. Also, I want to remind you that we offer travel grants for our international young evaluators to attend the annual conference. So please look for those opportunities so that you can join us in Washington, D.C. Believe me, there's lots of fun things to do in Washington, D.C., even beyond attending sessions at the American Evaluation Association. I have my email here, and I am happy to respond. Unfortunately, I don't speak French. Hablo español, pero solamente muy despacio. But I am happy to interact, and I'm looking forward to visiting a lot of different countries during my 12 months coming up. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to address questions.
It was a fantastic presentation. We have great material there and great resources. Thanks so much. We're going to start with the questions. I compiled a couple of them from earlier, and maybe I'll read them to you because the chat feature scrolls up. So I have a couple of questions. One was from Caroline Kamen. She says that she's very interested to see how the AEA competencies will compare to the CES competencies. She says that she knows that the latter have provoked much discussion and debate, and it's very difficult to agree on, and the conversation is always being pushed forward. So how will the competencies will be compared between the American Evaluation Association and the Canadian Evaluation Association? Going to give you one more question now, and then maybe a couple of more if we have time. Bibuska says, Kathryn says she didn't have an evaluation degree. I'm curious at what point in her career she started calling herself an evaluator. And just as a follow-up, one third question, how does one know who is a good evaluator when you're looking for a mentor? That's Fasila Hussein who asked this question. So how do we know who is a good evaluator, hence mentor? Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Josette. So those are, I'm trying to decide which one to answer first. In terms of when did I see myself as evaluator, that's pretty interesting. The way I got into evaluation is that I was hired here to teach research and statistics, and in my very first semester they said the person that was asked to teach program evaluation canceled on us, could you teach it? And I said, what is it? And so I taught the class, but was very fortunate to find a mentor, Joe Holy, in town, who was at the time at another university, but offered people to come and just have a community of practice once a month, brown bag luncheons. And so I started learning from him. And from the very first start, that over 3 decades ago when I taught my class, we taught it by working with real nonprofits, and I still do this with real clients doing pro bono evaluation work. And so I started doing a lot of pro bono work with my students where I'm actively involved, and then pretty soon I started getting asked to work on projects, contracts that were, and small things that didn't involve too much travel, but with some government agencies, federal agencies, and local nonprofits, and I started actually doing that. So, I don't know, but it certainly wasn't the first year, probably wasn't even the first 5 years. I was able to work on textbooks with Joe Holy, and once I started actually writing textbooks with Joe Holy, I think that probably was when I felt more like I was actually an evaluator. It's funny because I was providing evaluation work and reporting, but I don't know if I would have called myself evaluator, which is relevant to one of the other questions that was raised was, how do you know who's a good evaluator? And I think the key thing is not their formal degree, but their experience. I would look at what they have on their resume of where they've done previous evaluation work. I would ask for references from people that actually were the users of their evaluation projects. and get their permission to call those folks. So it's kind of like when you hire someone, you do reference checks and you talk to people they've worked with before. I would do the same thing with evaluators, because you don't know how a person's going to work out just because of something on their resume in terms of a degree or a certificate. I would probe the people with whom they've worked before. And I would be very wary if they have absolutely no experience and they've never worked on an evaluation project. That would probably be a red flag. Another question you raised was, how are the AEA competencies going to compare to the Canadian? And I would say that they will probably be just more extensive. That is, the Jean King, who has led our effort, had put out competencies, had been out on the web for a long time, and I know that the Canadian competencies drew from her work, and so I don't think there's going to be huge conflicts. It's just that the thinking has expanded. And actually, we owe a debt to the Canadians, thank you, because they have been able to work with these competencies, find out what isn't working so well, what needs to be expanded or reinterpreting. So we're definitely learning from the Canadians. So we owe them a debt of thanks. And so I don't think that you will see that they will be different, but they'll be more extensive, and they will be able to work from the Canadian experience. Josette, other questions? I hope I addressed all three.
A couple of more. So one other question was, is there any list of competencies that is gathered together, all initiatives worldwide? And there's another one last one. Is part of work related to communications and evaluation, such as conducting in-depth interviews, preparing evaluation reports, planning dissemination strategy of the evaluation results. Can this work also be identified as work in evaluation, or these activities and competencies are just common work? Thank you, Kathy. I'm gonna give the floor to you again.
Yes, I saw that question, and I think they mean communications work, and this is a very interesting question. I think to do a really wonderful job with communicating results, you do need to understand evaluation. So in other words, having a degree in English or a resume filled with writing marketing materials is not enough. I do believe that communicating effectively in evaluation work actually it requires understanding of evaluation as a profession, understanding the values and the ethical dimensions. So I think that simply being a good writer or simply being a good project manager is not enough. You would need to have people working with you, at least with evaluation expertise. And on the other question, no, not really. I think that not something that you can't go on a website and see the array of all the competencies laid out and so you can compare. What's interesting, for example, in the international arena, you have the DAC standards. There's some standards out there, but standards are not the same thing as competencies. A standard might be, so for example, transparency. Provide all reports to the public. That's a standard. That's not the same thing as a competency. A competency deals much more specifically with the kind of skills an evaluator has, for example, on how to portray the methodology utilized in a report. So we would be comparing apples and oranges if you looked at some standards that some funders provide, and then you looked at competencies. Remember, they're not going to be at the same level. But, for example, I know within the American Evaluation Association's efforts to be inclusive and to learn about what we want to identify as competencies, we have looked at all of these competencies. So, yes, are they compared, but it's by the people, the task force that are working on the competencies would have those materials, but it's not something that I could just point to a place to go get them. So I see that Rita Oksenin says that they are trying to make all competencies and standards available and accessible. So that's great. Thank you.
So much, Kathy. It was a fantastic presentation, and thank you everyone for the great questions we had.